Oh no, don't take the build, Russia. You're gonna make Akira sad. We opened, unfortunately, not on the Denliner. The seniors were on their last school trip before graduation, and while Asuka was having a good time initially, that feeling quickly faded. This doesn't seem like the right music to go with a scene like this. Oh, I know how to fix it. Actually, it was a different kind of a quiet demon that stowed away after hearing about how much fun her friend was gonna have. Fortunately, Asuka knew exactly how to deal with her. Yeah, that's the face of someone who just flushed their goldfish down the toilet. Though I guess she was too big for that, so she had to keep the mermaid hidden. Not that it would really matter, as soon after...
Tickets, please.
Oh, if only. Yep, Numeri had snuck on board and, for whatever reason, was dressed as a conductor. Even though I'm pretty sure her lower half will give her away. I mean, why even do this? Did someone on staff just really want to see the Seasub cosplay? And never mind, I think I answered my own question. And as for why she was there, well, that was obvious. She had a lot of victims. Fortunately for our heroines, they had arrived at a brief stopover in the mountains where Asuka and her could have a truly epic showdown. Yeah, personally, I think the scene could have just used some slightly more dramatic music, but still pretty damn hilarious regardless. Of course, they still had to hide Laura from Yuriko, though that wouldn't be too hard as these two clearly didn't want to be anywhere near the other, as expressed really well here with just a minimal amount of dialogue. But yeah, it's worth mentioning, this is another Isamu Murayama script, so he got 2 episodes in a row, and thus likely wrote this one knowing that he was essentially going to get 46 minutes to tell the story he wanted to. I still think he should have done more with Asuka's character in essentially part 1, but whatever. Credit should also really go to the director and storyboarder here for their amazing visual storytelling. Seriously, look at that hand twitch when Laura asked about Yuriko. Though we'll save talking about that more for the closing thoughts, as yeah, Laura wanted to know what was Asuka's deal with the Prez. She did eventually get some answers after a little triggering. As covered in the last episode, the 2 were tennis double partners, and again, damn this visual storytelling for doing such an amazing job showing how well they work together as a team. It was clear that they could only pull off feints like this with a high level of skill and trust, the latter of which would be soon tested. As after reaching the finals in a tournament, their opposing team broke into Yuriko's locker with the intent of breaking her racket. Asuka managed to stop them with a little force. The opponents would later claim that they had simply gotten the wrong locker and they never intended to damage Yuriko's racket. And unfortunately, the officials believed their claims as apparently no evidence could suggest otherwise. Now, originally, I thought that their nippers could have been used to expose them, but upon further research, those can be used for racket maintenance. And here I thought they were only good for making model kits. But yeah, to make matters worse, they counterclaimed by saying that Asuka assaulted them, and that if they didn't make amends by dropping out of the tournament, the entire Aozora Tennis Club could be disbanded. As such, Yuriko, while admitting that she believed Asuka's story, was intent on following through much to her partner's objections. And not too surprisingly, the rest of the club backed Yuriko. And while I do personally side more with Asuka, as by not standing up to these bitches, they'll likely repeat their crimes, I do also understand both sides of the argument. If they had failed to prove their case against their opponents, then, well, it would have been game over for the entire club. Thus, as absolutely unjust and cowardly as it all was, throwing Asuka under the bus was probably the safest choice. Though, for the girl herself, while losing the game definitely sucked, the bigger issue was not having anyone backing her. It's really good stuff, and I wouldn't mind if the rest of the episode was just all about this and... Alright, they still have to deal with Discount Doc Ock. I mean, okay, to be fair, some of the visuals here were really good, like this subtle bit of the backgrounds changing to more rainbow colors as the Araneda arrived. Yeah, sorry to tell you guys, but unless you have Rengoku, you're not gonna be able to recreate Mugen Train. I mean, they certainly tried to recreate that film's quality with these simplistic yet really effective watercolor backgrounds to really get across the speed of the train. Unfortunately, a lot of the close-ups of Numeri didn't look nearly as good, with some very limited animation and an overabundance of speed lines.
リラックスしましたよ。全然リラックスしているようには見えない。
During all of this, Laura, Asuka, and Yuriko help with the evacuations, with the latter two, in a good moment, putting aside their differences, at least temporarily. Great stuff that also really got across the villains as actually being threatening for once. Hell, they even managed to score an actual civilian injury, with Yuriko getting knocked out in one of the prettiest ways possible. Seriously, what is with that pose? Still, with her out, our heroines could transform to fight. Though Asuka did take a quick minute to check on her old partner.
大丈夫か？大丈夫です。
Hey, you two should kiss!
I'm a little sad I haven't been able to use that and the Yukio bridge clip as much for this season. Anyway, the actual fight this week was no denliner fight, to say the least. I mean, this is kind of the opposite of 29's fights, with the colors and models all looking spot on, but the actual animation was kind of lacking. You could kind of tell that they put all of their effort into that Yuri scene. I mean, I'm not complaining, I just felt it necessary to point out. That aside, we did at least get this really nice and plot-relevant shot. And eventually, the rest of their team arrived so that they could perform the mammoth stamping finish. Oh yeah, throughout this episode, these three were running to their train, seemingly to try and recover Laura, though as we could tell by Manatsu's reaction here, they didn't even know Laura had stolen away. Now, as it turned out, the reason they had spent the entire day running around in Precure form was to deliver Asuka's pillow.
That's the joke.
Yeah, well, I will admit I did appreciate some of the setup for this. The actual punchline was nothing special, and probably just there because the writers are required to include the group finisher, even though again, Asuka's individual finisher looks so much better, but whatever, minor detail in the grand scheme of things. Anyway, the episode ended with slight hinting that Yuriko and Asuka were on better terms, mostly because the former was starting to catch on to her secret. Though if she had stuck around for a few more seconds, then she would have found an even bigger smoking gun. Okay, now I think we've officially found Murayama's best episode for the series. He just did a really good job finally giving us some much needed development for Asuka, with a very understandable conflict between her and Yuriko, where it's hard to blame either party for their fallout. Combine that with some good animation and art direction for the most part, and you have one of the stronger episodes of this third quarter. The director and storyboarder this week were Takao Iwai and Yukio Kaizawa respectively. Both guys are fairly seasoned vets, with the latter in particular having series-directed Digimon Tamers, which yeah, explains a lot. Seriously, while this was no Sakuga fest by any means, I would actually say this is probably the best visual storytelling we've seen in this entire series. Interestingly, these two had worked together previously for episode 27 of the show, which, yeah, with Aoyama's frugal animation direction, they unfortunately couldn't even reach half of their potential, so thankfully they got a second chance here. Though of course, they wouldn't be able to do anything without a good script, and thankfully, when not forced to include some mismatched comedy for the show, Murayama could do some amazing character and scenario work. Again, I actually did have to do a little research to see if the situation with the tennis club checked out, and I think it did. Feel free to correct me. Regardless, it was a very fitting scenario for Asuka, as it really paid off all of the build-up from her debut episode. Of course she would be reluctant to join a team when her last one's best moves were the under-the-bus throws. And yet, from a purely technical standpoint, no one was really in the wrong, which made it all the more frustrating and gripping of a situation. As a result, I really do want to see Asuka and Yuriko make up. Unfortunately, I don't think the latter will be able to become a Precure this late into the series, but still, I'm invested in seeing the resolution to this, so points there. Overall, this was a fantastic Asuka episode that thankfully wasn't usurped by Laura like some of us feared. She did have a good moment here, but just that, a moment, so thanks for that. Honestly, I kind of wish we had just skipped to this last week, especially since this might be Murayama's last episode for this series. Yeah, generally, writers for these shows get 6 to 9 episodes and don't say nice. If he does get 3 more episodes, then great, but if he doesn't, well, at least he finished his run on a high note. I do hope life is treating all of you well. Me personally, I'm just looking forward to one of my favorite holidays of the year. I mean, yeah, I do find it rather unfortunate that a lot of kids won't be able to trick or treat for at least another year, but I still really appreciate the spirit of Halloween. As such, I'll try to crank out some sort of video by the end of the month. I'm still trying to decide on what to do, on top of trying to get my Gold Prince review done. Still look forward to it, and until then though, farewell for now my friends, and... oh, my train's here. I hope this thing at least has some good footrest.